they were, one was from Muscle Construction, and Muscle Construction has worked on the project here in, has a project here in Caldwell, actually. They worked on projects across the South. Maybe you knew Muscle Construction, like work that they do. His proposal, their proposal, rather, consisted of a plan that contemplated cleaning the building. So 213, 215, 217 would be on site, and they would be renovated. So very attractive and upscale building is what's proposing at that location. And the goal is to accommodate future restaurant users that might have an additional space for traditional user, retail user, and then also maximize outdoor dining facilities. Second proposal was from RRC Contract. RRC has an active project here in Caldwell there at 712 Arthur Street. That building has it's housed up okay and quite dark room and still they're operating in that facility. Individual named Derek Cooper with RRC, and Derek has proven himself time and time again with various projects across the Valley, very similar to Muscle Construction, because they have some projects that justify excellence, which is what we're hoping to achieve for the project. And RRC is proposing a new construction build that will feature on the first floor.
You are muted. You are unmuted.
Oh, okay. I'm going to pause and see if this is online. Maybe we'll make sure it's right. Oh, no problem. I would tell a couple of those I don't have any.
Oh.
All right, how does that sound? A little better?
Basically, yeah.
Good deal, good deal. Well, thank you, Brent. I appreciate it. Great warm up for me. That was awesome. So I'm ready to go. So just real briefly, 213, 215, 217 South Kemble received 2 qualifying proposals on site for this RFP. The first of the 2 is from Muscle Construction. Muscle Construction is proposing an opportunity to redevelop the space as it stands now. So they would retain the buildings and renew the buildings that are on site to create a space that would accommodate a restaurant or future retail users, and then, of course, utilize the outdoor space that's available at that location. The second proposal is from RRC Contractors. This group is one that is looking at a new build, new construction on site there. So in accordance with the agency's plan to demolish the buildings, they're looking to construct a new space that would feature on the first floor 3 retail users. The second floor would be office space, and the third floor, they actually gave us 2 proposals. One would be a 2-story that would be restaurant, office space, and then the second proposal would be a 3-story that would be restaurant, office space, and residential. The residential, in speaking with this, the proposer, they were looking at doing residential, but were leery of the lack of parking that would be dedicated to residential at that location. So they gave us 2 to consider there. So staff, of course, looked at these proposals, put them up against the RFP that we had sent out, and just made sure that everything aligned properly, that we were going to get a project that would be the highest and best use of this location. After considering the 2 very closely and looking at them and seeing what they would bring in, it is the staff's recommendation to put forward RRC Contractors at this location. Here are some of the reasons why. We looked at RRC, and RRC is actually working with some end users. They have 2, or actually 3, that they've identified for this project, 2 of which are restaurant operators and 1 is an office user. So they have solidified some users there that we find to be very agreeable to downtown Caldwell and the future growth plans that we have for the city. Additionally, we looked at the density at that location and felt that the density would be adequate for what we're hoping to accomplish in downtown Caldwell. Third, the concept of having some condominiums downtown was appealing to staff as we reviewed the two proposals. So we thought that, you know, if there's a chance to provide more critical mass downtown, to look at patronizing our businesses that are there, that can put some really pride of ownership into the spaces that they have in downtown Caldwell. That's something that we currently don't have a lot of residential available. Of course, we have the apartments that are under construction in Creekside, but the ability to own property in downtown Caldwell is very limited. So we thought that this project would provide some much needed residential that could be owned in that sense. This group was looking at, I believe, 7 to 8 condominiums at that location, and those are the considerations that we thought of. So just to recap, the end users, the densities that they were proposing, and also the residential component, we found to be agreeable for this RFP at this location. So with that, I would like to recommend the establishment of a DDA with RRC, or at least the negotiations to establish that at this time upon your approval. And with that, I stand for any questions you might have.
Okay, questions for Mr. Jenkins? Ms. Warwick?
So are you recommending that we accept his proposal of a two-story or a three-story building?
Yes, Commissioner or Chairman Commissioner Warwick, we are looking at the 3-story concept as a recommendation here, and I understand the dynamic of parking and the consideration for parking for the residential units. But in speaking with staff, and particularly Jerome Mapp before his departure, he thought that, and the staff agreed to his statements here, but really we were thinking that the downtown living environment is a unique one. There's a chance, of course, that in years to come that there will be parking accommodations provided. Of course, we're working actively to solidifying some parking for downtown, or additional parking for downtown. So we're thinking that currently, as it stands today, there might be some prevailing concerns, but in years to come, it might be a moot point, right, where we have a structure or more parking available downtown that could accommodate. Secondly, I think the dynamics downtown with a small degree or at least condensed residential view, and not having as many residential on site would lend itself to less parking, right? So if we had 7 to 8 or 9 condominiums rather than maybe 200, of course, it's not going to further exacerbate our parking concerns. So we thought that those things considered, parking might not be top of mind. For us, it was more the critical mass component that would be provided there, and then the ownership elements of this residential that would be provided. And that was a very long way to say the 3rd-story concept is what we're recommended, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have as a follow-up.
Ms. Warwick?
Do we have the option of accepting either one, and then they're going to be happy with that, or are they going to, if we accept the 3rd story and they come back to 2-story, is that still going to be within the confines of that DDA, or are we going to have to look at that?
Yes, in this case, it looks like either one would be acceptable. And speaking with the developer here, he wanted to give us 2 options to consider. And originally, he had taken the approach of talking to adjacent property owners to see if there was a way that they can integrate some shared parking into this concept. As he was unsuccessful in doing that, he wanted to make sure that the agency had 2 options to consider as it relates to RRC.
So with this project, we would still be on foot for demo input there now, as the other one would not, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
Mr. Ogden?
Yes, Mr. Jenkins, just so I'm clear, so on a 3-story building, the builder wants to build without any designated parking?
Yes, Chairman Commissioner Ogden, that is correct. The developer had originally engaged in a conversation with some adjacent property owners that had some parking available, but the long-term view of this project was just not suitable for a shared parking agreement. So yes, he would move forward without any designated parking for the condominiums that would be in place there.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Doty?
So again, we're back to parking, right? So we already have the apartment building going in that we don't have enough parking for, and that we tried to structure something to make it feel good to all of us that there was parking for them, and it's already going to be tight for them. Now we're talking a few more, at least a couple of cars per unit. If there's 8 units, that's 16 more cars plus their guests. My concern is tying up downtown parking spaces because you're not gone from your home all the time, right? And so we already have the one issue of the one apartment complex, not in the exact same vicinity, but downtown. And then we're gonna add more housing downtown, and there's absolutely no designated parking for that. So then we end up, my concern is parking in front of businesses, and then the space is tied up for hours with someone to park there. So unless the city takes a different approach, which is actually taking enforcement on some sort of regulation of limited parking or meters or something, I just think it would affect our downtown businesses with those folks taking up the parking spaces in front of businesses because there's limited parking. Just my thought.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Doty. Really appreciate those insights. I would, you know, my thought is, gosh, this is the long view in a sense. Of course, with parking in the immediate, there are some concerns. Our thought and just collective conversation was really circulated around, okay, there's going to be a dynamic here downtown that people come to expect. There might be biking, you know, that's there for the residents. Of course, they're going to be just a little more predisposed to doing that or different modes of transportation. But in the long view of this particular project, this is something we look at as really a critical location for us in development. And as it concerns or as it relates to parking, it's just something that we feel will be ameliorated in the future. And this is, you know, the residential here is going to remain for 20, 30, 40 years. So just making sure that the right project is here. And of course, today there are some prevailing issues, but of course, as we work through the details of parking holistically downtown, we feel like those can be mitigated. And just to have residential here at this location, in terms of, especially if they can be owned, right, in the sense of a condominium, that's just something that was really appealing to us. So we understand the both sides of the coin, and for the development team, we just felt like this was certainly advantageous long term to have some residential here at this location.
It's definitely appealing. I wish I could live there.
Yeah.
Gets you there far. I would love to live there and get to these meetings more quickly. But, so I'm not saying that the plan is bad. I just want to make that clear too. I think that would be great to be able to live right there and you can walk everywhere, bike everywhere. But once again, then your car is still there as you're using the bicycle. So that's just my concern.
I share the exact same concern as for the next period of time, whether that's 5 years or whatever. If you have 8 apartments and conservatively they each have 1 car, those are all businesses, you know, because this is going to be 2 stories of more business that those 8 cars are going to be parked in front of. And I just, you know, and that's my big concern is if you talk to any of the business owners downtown, that's already the big gripe. So, yeah, I totally, I would live there too. I mean, we'll be neighbors.
Mr. Moore?
Trump all of that, because I've always said that I want to buy the first condominium in downtown Caldwell.
Are you willing to sign a note to that effect?
And I have my money up, but I think it would be a great idea, living down there, 8 years of my life, there's no way I'm gonna park a vehicle down on the street overnight. It's hard to unload your whatever home, have buddies over, have your friends over. It's a tough situation, so I totally agree with all that's dealt with. Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Mr. Jenkins.
Certainly.
So this is a private funding deal, correct? What is the recommendation? Very well put together. One of the better ones I've seen. I mean, I'd probably sign off on the deal without even looking at credit. But,
Thank you for your comments.
Ms. Warwick?
Parking, as you see right there, it's all empty.
Mhm.
That's awesome, like that, right in the middle of the day when all the other downtown parking is taken. What can we do to make it so that it's more attractive to people to park there. I know it's privately owned. I think if that's what was more accessible to people, rather than having to put something in your, in your phone and to try to figure out how to park there, that might solve some of these problems, because, I don't know how many parking places that is, but it looks like it's 40 anyway, 35.
Absolutely.
Who owns that?
Yeah, Commissioner Warwick, that is owned by Rediscovered Books. And the owners there have been open to discussing parking arrangements, shared parking agreements, things of that nature. It's just the difficulty in securing parking at that location is the long-term approach that some of these developers would require for their development. Rediscovered Books has plans to redevelop that parking lot in the future, so they don't want to tie up the property with any commitments. So that's the main concern. Laura and Bruce Delaney have been very much open to discussing terms of parking in the short term, but as it relates to long-term parking, it's just very difficult to tie that down. Now, they do have signage out. It is monitored or managed by a group, actually a third-party group that's out of Boise, and they come and monitor the parking lot. So they do have signage up that obviously it's paid per hour, hourly parking available and things like that. So the signage conveys that. But because I think the signage sometimes scares people as well, that they feel that they might be towed or they might get a boot on their car if they return back or something like that. So there, when there's other parking options, I think people just are looking. They're just looking for, of course, for me, I look for the free options when I can. And I'm sure
I've talked. I'm old. Okay, I've talked to people older than me. Some of those folks don't have smartphones, so they couldn't park there if they wanted to, if they were willing to pay, because you've got to have a smartphone to be able to do it. My mom won't park there because she doesn't have a smartphone.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't know how to do it, so it makes it inaccessible to folks, and it's frequently empty like that, and it just seems terrible that every other parking place is taken in downtown Caldwell, and that parking lot sits there like that.
Yeah.
And to Brad's point, we need to look at maybe some parking enforcement downtown, because I need to go to the post office a couple of days a week. There are people that park in those 15-minute spots for hours because it's not monitored. So why have the signage if we're not going to monitor and do something about it?
Great.
Off topic, but.
I want to clarify that I wouldn't say I'd sign off on the deal, but if I was a lender, I would look at this and say, that's a pretty nice presentation, good letters of reference. They have pictures included in a lot of their stuff in Nampa. It's first class. I don't know if anybody's seen it, but yeah, so they're carrying themselves very well through the process.
Mr. Ramirez?
Mr. Chair, I gotta get my 2 cents in too, I guess. I don't think it matters what project ends up going down there. Parking's always going to be an issue. Only difference is the residential, which will be issues for the folks that live there. I think even Muscle's proposal talked about parking issues and sharing with the local surrounding businesses, which is what at least 2 floors of this project would end up doing, is sharing their parking with the surrounding businesses.
Right.
The rub would be the residential side, is where those folks are going to park their cars. However, if we don't look ahead, we'll never get that kind of opportunity to get the residential started. We'll always be turning down projects because there's something to do with parking. So our issue shouldn't be, in this particular case anyway, the parking at the time being. It's going to need to be parking for everybody downtown is what we need to figure out. It's a great opportunity, and I think I agree. The building, it looks beautiful. Been looking for more than 2-story or single-story stuff going downtown, because obviously that's just very limited as to what you can do in a 1-story building compared to this 3-story. But if we don't get the ball rolling somewhere, we're going to stay single-story. We're still fighting over parking, the 10, 15 parking spots that are down there. So my 2 cents.
We bite the bullet in the short term and hope it figures itself out in the long term.
Well, I think we have a little bit of
Sounds like it.
influence in figuring something out in the long term. I mean, that's
We do.
something we have to start preparing for. Otherwise, we're gonna keep doing this kind of stuff and creating worse and worse parking issues for what we do start building downtown. I was just, before the meeting, I was talking to the chair about trying to get into Happy Teriyaki, which is a sit-down restaurant during the farmer's market on Tuesday evening. I had to park 6 blocks away to walk down to place a, takeout order.
Yeah.
I mean, I could have called, obviously, but even then, to come down and pick it up, you've got to park 6 blocks away to come pick it up. When I walked in the restaurant, there's 2 or 3 people in there. Everybody else was downtown at the, so we already have these parking things going on. It's costing that business, I'm assuming, you know, there was the restaurants in the square were full. Everybody's down there eating, but they're just off the square and they got 2 or 3 people and, you know, 45 chairs that don't have a butt in it because people aren't gonna park 5 blocks to walk down there.
Chairman,
Mr. Moore?
I would think that, parking on any type of financing, private or parking would have some sort of bearings on the whole project, and I don't care if it's cash flow. Find out the money, but you know, that's gonna have some sort of a bearing, so I think maybe we might be getting a little bit of that. That solution to it, yeah.
Mr. Orton, I know that, city council had entertained the idea of a workshop on this, the parking situation, a couple of months ago. Am I correct? But it was postponed?
Mr. Chairman, I don't recall that off
Okay,
the top.
all right.
But I can tell you if you're interested.
Yeah.
I do think that the care and interest about parking on the commission's part is valuable because, and important, because there certainly is some challenges there and, I guess it is perhaps helpful for the commission to know, Canyon County has approached the city about doing a local improvement district to do streetscape type improvements like the downtown up Albany, or up to Albany and over on Albany, to the courthouse campus. That's helpful because if we have lighting and streetscape that helps people feel comfortable, it is less than 9 blocks to walk from the county's parking. That parking is empty at night. So that's one step. It's not the only step. We know we need a lot of, we're looking for solutions all over the place on parking in the downtown. Great that we have a great problem like that, but it's also a problem still. So, anyway, for the commission's info.
Mr. Chairman, one more thing. I just want to read. In his concept plan, he says, attached is the concept that he and the architect came up with showing 2 versions. Currently working on parking for potentially 8 apartment units. If the parking is not able to be achieved, we will reduce the building size to 2 stories. So has he already made that decision, or is he still working through that?
I think he's Commissioner Warwick, he's open to different, obviously the recommendation of the agency is gonna influence him in this manner. I let him know, I said, you know, just as you prepare to submit this proposal, parking is gonna be a concern as it relates, you know, if you have any residential in your project. So that's something that he was aware of, before he submitted, the proposal, which he probably made sure he had a second plan or a backup plan for the agency to consider. It's difficult, you know, these projects are really challenging, especially when they're at constrained locations like this, where you just don't have a lot of parking available. But it is rare when you have a true mixed-use project like this, and this is a gateway for the city of Caldwell, gateway entry into downtown Caldwell. So it's just important that, obviously, the agency, that we select a project that's gonna be a standout for years to come.
Mr. Allgood?
Mr. Orton, can you pull up on the map the discussed location and then behind it, right along the creek?
Yeah, one more. Yep.
There you go.
Mr. Jenkins, do you know who owns the little shed there? I believe it's out of Rostock Furniture at one point. I don't know if they still own it. Do you know who owns that?
Commissioner August, Glenn Koch owns that property.
Is he still hanging on to that? Like,
He is.
'cause I think you could get 8 parking spots in there.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and he, in working with him over the, you know, years and months and just previous discussions I've had with him, he's certainly not at the moment inclined disposing of that property or selling that property. So that's just, you know, that presents a great redevelopment opportunity in the future, I think.
And this is a tough one, because I certainly understand the idea that if we never take the first step, we're never gonna get the first step. But I kind of feel like when we built the Terry Riley building with 3 or 4 units of apartments above it, it had an adverse effect on the local businesses because there's just not enough parking for that building, and all the residents there. And I mean, that's been up, what, a couple of years now? And I mean, the building's doing okay, but again, I know people that have had to close off their parking lots to make sure they have enough parking for their guests and their employees. And so again, I'm still just concerned about making a problem we already have worse with residential. Yeah, I was hoping, cause yeah, that's a piece of property back there that could be fenced off and turned into private parking for residents, but anyway, yeah.
Yeah, those are all great points, and I consider them to be all valid, and appreciate, you know, your feedback there. And staff, you know, recognizes the need for parking downtown as a whole, and understand the issue that could be created here potentially. The recommendation, of course, from staff's point of view is, gosh, highest and best use, just making sure we absolutely maximize each and every property that we have in downtown Caldwell. And of course, we recognize and acknowledge the issues that you've presented.
We need to put a 4-story parking garage at Rediscovered Books there.
There you go.
And then another one down here where we're planning.
Any other comments? Well, how do we want to handle this recommendation from staff?
Well, mine would be if Mr. Chairman, if they can't secure private parking for the residents above, I would not be in favor of that. So I'm definitely for the 2-story building. I just don't think we're gonna, I also understand that we're looking at the future, but we already have that huge apartment complex coming in that we're, quite honestly, we don't have the parking for all those individuals. Now we're just gonna add more on top of that, so. Just my thoughts.
Would you like to turn your thoughts into a motion?
I'll make a motion, that to proceed with the 3-story building if private parking can be found for the 3rd floor residents. Am I on track so far? And if not, then we can proceed with the 2-story building, proposed by RRC contractors. Okay. Anything I need to add to that?
That sounds concise.
Which is kind of pretty close to what they have written anyway, so.
Yeah. Did you have a comment, Mr. Jenkins?
Yes, Chairman. Just real quickly, so the RRC is proposing a start date of summer 2023 with a completion date in 2024. The reason being is because, of course, 213 Kimball is currently occupied by a user, and they will be vacating the space, I believe, in February. So the developer here is acknowledging that that particular user is going to be there for that time. One question that comes to mind is, Commissioner Doty, as you presented that motion, just thinking of an adequate timeline to work with, right, for the developer to see if he can gather the adequate parking for the development. At what point then do we move toward the 2nd-story concept, or do we stay with the 3rd-story concept? So I'm just trying to figure out exactly how I might articulate that to the developer.
I'm open for suggestions. He's gotta know when, I mean, if he's
Yeah.
planning, he's gotta,
So are both applicants in the same position? It's gonna be 2023 before they start?
Yes, they are. Just according to the terms that we were able to establish with the current, the building owner at 213 South Kimball.
Right, you won't be out till February of 2023.
Didn't it look like one of them's gonna start?
Yeah.
This urban renewal area will be sunset by then.
Mhm.
So I'm just maybe our legal counsel could give us some advice, but just wanna make sure we have the ability to adjust after that.
And we
Should
have the
something-
funding to tear it down?
Yeah, should something go wrong. Mr. Hilty, did you hear me?
I did. And I think the answer is yes, that this is based on our conversations with the tax commission about what sunset looks like. If you have ongoing projects and funds allocated to those projects, you can see those projects through to the end. Now, I think that gets you past the, what if things are in process after the sunset? I think you're still okay. You may be out of money. And so if the adjustment means that there were additional funds necessary beyond what had been allocated, that certainly would present a challenge.
Well, if this developer backed out and we had to tear down that building, we have to have money there to do that.
One developer that wants to use the current buildings.
Right. Just as long as,
Right.
just as long as we were able to fulfill our part of it and demo those buildings after January of 2023, be okay.
Right. Yes.
Carol has that down as a project, right? Get that on the record.
Yeah.
Did that, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. August.
Well, as far as Mr. Jenkins' concerned about a timeline for the developer to say 2 or 3 stories, I think that would be part of the DDA for the developer to tell us.
Okay, yeah.
Certainly, we have until March, when the tenant leaves.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's helpful. Thank you.
That should give them enough time to line up the parking that would be demanded, I would think.
Great.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Doty. Do we have a second to the motion? A second by Mr. Allgood. Would the secretary call the roll, please?
Yes.
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 Yes. There you go, Steve. Okay.
They've got a couple of years to secure that shed.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Good.
Takes us to item number 2, an update report on the redevelopment at Arthur and Kimball. That's catty corner from Flying M. Who's making our presentation this afternoon?
I'm guessing it's not Steve, is it?
Mr. Senga or Steve?
Absolutely. Chairman, Commissioners, yes, I will absolutely step up. So this project is another exciting one for us. Of course, this was a former RFP. This is another very prominent location in downtown Caldwell. So it's my pleasure to have been working with Ken Senga with Aztec Development. Ken is here in attendance this afternoon, and this one we've gone back and forth over the past few months with different concepts that would be the best match for this project. And we had talked about parking, of course, and talked about potential concepts that could come in. As Ken and even myself, we've worked with different restaurant operators. That is a common question that has come up. Where are guests going to park, especially at this location, just being where it's at. There's just not very few options for parking, very limited here. So Ken has gone and just devised different plans that even considered underground parking at this location, just to find different ways to make this work and really to attract the best operators that are possible. And he's got some great contacts that he's worked with, and the local intel is that designated parking for a restaurant operator would be advantageous in order for him to move forward. So Ken has a few updates to share regarding the property and what his plans are moving forward. But again, I'm very excited, and Ken has some great enthusiasm for this project. So with that, I'll welcome Ken up to the stage.
Welcome, Mr. Senga. Good to have you.
Thanks, Steve. Good afternoon. As Steve alluded to, we have been working very enthusiastically to try to figure out a way to bring in a solid operator to this location, being how prime the location is when we're working with Mark, Brent, and tried very hard to figure out a way of having a access from the alley to build a very expensive but needed subterranean parking lot, and that will not work per Brent, and some other limitations of access, and losing most of the prime downtown, the first floor space, because of the grading requirements of the ramping and all that stuff. So we have been successful in putting the property next door under contract, so we now have a possibility of developing that whole site instead of just the one that is being dedicated by the city to us. So we have been working very diligently to try to move forward in good faith, and have a couple of very excited and solid restaurant slash bar operators. The key factor that you guys already have talked so many times today is parking. And so we are trying to figure out some out-of-the-box options of either dedicated parking or off-site parking, or valet parking, or some kind of a resident parking. We're not even talking about the other stories, just the first story. And as soon as we have some clarity on that, we are ready to move forward.
Questions for Mr. Senga?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Moore?
I have a question for Ken. Which property is under contract?
One closest to the alley.
Oh,
Yes,
okay.
what is that, 113 Kimball, yes. Yes.
On the second floor, the 113? For
Y-
3 years?
Yeah, I think those 3 lots actually are the ones that are under contract, yeah. That same ownership.
So I had heard rumor that you were gonna be able to have a few on-site parking stalls. Is that correct, or that everything will be,
There's no way of achieving that.
no way of achieving that?
Yeah, we tried every which way. It's just not big enough site. By the time you do ingress, egress, all your, traffic situation going on both sides, it's not possible. And even if it was, the number of parking spots you're getting out of it and the amount of prime ground floor space that you're losing, it doesn't pencil out.
Right.
And going forward to the parking, I'm strongly vested in Caldwell, and I strongly believe in Caldwell, and I foresee Caldwell as I want to jump from Boise to Caldwell and skip everything in between. I want Caldwell to be the next spot where people want to go, and I want it to thrive. I think we can talk about those 8 units here or 5 units there, and I think at some point we have to figure out how to pull the Band-Aid and go for it. We have a group who is wanting to come in and build a parking structure, but the question is, if you have free parking all around, Steve said he likes to park for free, I like to park for free, all of you would probably like to park for free. Till we have some of those things figured out, how do you make it, if somebody's gonna put $15 million into a 4-story parking garage, they wanna make money out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Is city willing to do some kind of revenue guarantees? We can figure it out very quickly, but there has to be some kind of fairness for at least for the next 5 to 10 years till we grow to that point where you are able to figure out if the as the chairman said, if the enforcement's happening or not. If people are parking in a 15-minute spot for 2 hours, then the next person has to go somewhere else to park. So all those things need to be figured out, first before we start. Other solution is to do a hop on, hop off service and, just have them go from a couple of main parking lots and keep on roving during the prime time. And, people can jump on, jump off and I think it'll be a great attraction for downtown, especially in the winter when we have so much going on. And, if you have some money budgeted, I'll take the lead on it and make it happen, because again, as I said, I'm willing to do extra work to make all this successful, but you can't have it without key. People are already, I had a meeting at noon at Indian Creek Steakhouse, and just happened to talk to a few different people. They said, right now for lunch it's okay, for dinner you can't find parking. Mr. Ramirez said, anywhere. And we think it's bad now. Wait till the 135, 40 units come in. It's gonna be a bad situation, guys. We can sit here and say, oh, it's gonna figure out. It's not. It's gonna be very bad. I'm sorry. I'm just saying as I've seen it in many other towns. I can fluff it up, but it's the straight answer.
I agree, you can't do parking garages without parking enforcement.
Yeah.
It's that simple, yeah. Or they don't make any money. No one parks in them. If there's no penalty for.
They mark your tires. You have 2 hours of shopping for lunch, and then in the evening, you can park anywhere you want, so you're constantly jockeying where you can park.
I grew up in Portland, and Dave, you might remember this since you spent some time over there, but before it got real wacky, the public transit had what was called Fairless Square.
Right.
You could jump on a bus anywhere downtown, and it ran a route of about 3 miles through downtown. And like Mr. Sangha mentioned, I mean, that might be an option in the short term from our parking across the tracks, just back through the business district.
Or even out to the courthouse.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in the short term, I mean, we do have parking, it's just not adjacent to the businesses that people want to frequent or the restaurants, but it also became an attraction. It became a drawing point for students and for young professionals that got on the bus and went where they wanted to go and left their car in a safe space. So, anyway.
Frankly, at Fort Worth, we did that. We did just that, because it was free.
Yeah.
And it's very doable.
Oh,
It's, you know, and you leave those couple of those trolleys, buses, whatever you wanna call them, and just after the service done, you do it during the prime hours, you know, 5 to 11 or something, or whatever the time makes sense. And after that, you just park them over there in one of the spots, and next day, the same thing. Maybe more so on the weekend, less during the weekdays. Just try to be proactive when it's needed.
Yeah, it's not a leap forward, it's just a tiny step forward, you know. We need something to take the pressure off immediately, and this is one way to do it.
That would do it.
Well, yeah, even if we had the workers just park at the county courthouse and that bus run them back and forth, once they become used to that, then that will open up some parking areas.
Any other questions for Mr. Sangha? Or Brent, you're leaning toward a microphone. Did you have something to?
You're so kind. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just, Ken, if you don't mind, Ken and I were chatting about this challenge before the meeting, and he suggested the idea of like a trolley, and I was like, whoa, what if you had something that reflected like the interurban, kind of a historical replica of an interurban that was self-driven to just kind of rove downtown and jump on and jump back off? Anyway, Ken's idea, but
I don't know about the self-driven part. I have to ask Google if it's there yet, but, you know.
I mean, not on tracks and not pulled by an engine, not that it wouldn't have an operator.
Right. Oh, sorry. Okay, then we're on the same page. I'm like, okay, you're in the future now.
Well, are we considering something, or is this just an update?
This is just an update from Mr. Sanger. We hadn't heard anything from him. There have been some scheduling differences and problems over the last few months. We just needed to
Well,
up to speed.
I absolutely love your forward thinking. I appreciate that a lot.
Thank you. I want, again, reiterating, I'm really committed to Caldwell. I really believe that we can really, and you guys have done great job already, but there's a lot to be done, and it's gonna be a beautiful, beautiful town. Just need to figure some things out and just pull the Band-Aid and go with it. We can sit here and talk about it for years to come, but something has to happen on that. Otherwise, it's gonna be a bottleneck or choke around all the local restaurants and stuff, and they're gonna not be able to succeed if they can't find enough people to come in and support them because of the lack of the parking.
Mr. Chairman, so are you stuck? I mean, do you have a direction that you're moving currently, or have you kind of exhausted everything you can think of there?
We have exhausted everything of on-site parking. Now we are trying to be creative about off-site parking, dedicated parking.
Before you start to construct anything?
Absolutely. We won't be able to start anything because I won't be able to fill that space. I can start construction tomorrow, technically speaking, as soon as possible. But if I have this beautiful building that nobody wants to come in, I don't want to build that beautiful building across the street from a beautiful plaza that's full all the time, and then my building is sitting there empty because no decent operator want to come in there because they can't justify, being in there because they can't fill the seats.
Thank you.
Any other comments, or? Very good. Thank you, Mr. Simon.
Thank you. Thank you
Much
so much.
appreciated. That brings us to the end of our agenda. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Allgood, second by Mr. Doty. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
There is. I mean, that's the removal.
We didn't ask them.
There's a rebate.
Because aren't we paying for that? We pay for it to be cleaned up?
Yes.